Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Kerrigan.
Wow. Well, I'm green again. Oh dear. Well, welcome everybody to Witch Talk. My name is Kerrigan, and today we have a fantastic guest, a unique guest actually, and we're going to talk about Druidry, we're going to talk about Druids, we're going to talk about mysteries of the earth and teachings of the earth, and we're going to talk about so many things that you don't even know. This show is going to be absolutely amazing. Now, the other thing that I have to tell you is that because we don't have Indigo Estrella still here, I wanted to, go ahead and kind of acknowledge some books that I think that they are very interesting books and that they should be addressed and they should be actually recommended to you. So that's what I'm going to do. But before that, I'm going to tell you how you can contact us on Witch Talk. Here we go. So, you want to know how to keep in touch with everything Witch Talk? Go to www.witchtalkshow.com and follow all the latest news. Listen directly to the show and enjoy it. Don't forget that all episodes of Witch Talk will be available to you on demand on Ustream. Click on Twitter, Facebook, or Google Plus on our own Ustream page and spread the word. Don't forget to join us on Ustream Crowd. Go to www.ustream.tv/channel/witchtalk-show. Do you want to be part of the show? Join our incredible conversations live on every show right here on Witch Talk. Witch Talk will air every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or approximately 9 p.m. in most Europe. Now, live in video, watch us on Ustream. Follow us on Twitter at Kerrigan, Kharagan, with an H after the K, or send us an email at witchtalkshow@gmail.com. Now, back to the show. So back to the show it is. Here we are again. So I just wanted to make a little introduction to the books, because I think that it's nice to have Witch Reads without Indigo, but it's not really the same thing. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some books, and then we're going to jump on to our guest today. We have a lot of books that I wanted to talk about, but it's not really in depth, so we can go very quickly through them. So here we go. So here we are on Witch Reads with Kerrigan. It's not really with Indigo Estrella. And I have a couple of books that some of them I already talked to you about. Some of them they're new to you. One of them, it's a very wonderful book. It's very small, but it's absolutely gorgeous, and she will be here. Morgana will be here talking with us about this book. It's called Beyond the Broomstick: Thoughts on the Philosophy of Wicca by Morgana Seithov. It's absolutely amazing. It was actually released in Spanish, translation in Spanish, and I believe in other languages too. And she will be here next Sunday, talking about this fabulous book. And we're going to talk about Wicca. Talking about Wicca also from Wiser Books, and this is, absolutely amazing because we have an author with us from Wiser also. It's Deborah Lipp's The Study of Witchcraft, a Guidebook to Advance Wicca, with forward by Isaac Bonowitz, and it's absolutely amazing. It's a very, very good book. We had her here talking about this book, actually, but I wanted to mention it because it's absolutely fabulous. I don't know if people I'm just putting the book next to my face, which is very nice. And also another book about Wicca, and this is not a show about Wicca, actually, but just bear with me. Wicca Magical Beginnings. Never, ever. I am tired of talking about this book. It's absolutely amazing. Wicca Magical Beginnings, a study of the possible origins of the ritual and practices found in this modern tradition of pagan witchcraft and magic, by Srita Dieste and David Rankin of Alvalonian Books. So absolutely a must-have for anybody that is a practitioner of Wicca or a new comer to Wicca. Also, and we are going to have her, Diana Paxson's another wiser book, The Way of the Oracle, an overview about the history of the oracles and modern intake also on some techniques on how to do oracle work. Absolutely amazing, and we're going to talk to her actually about this book also. Because we have almost a very interesting thing about Hecate coming, which is Hecate, Her Sacred Fires. It will be on the 6th of May. It will be up. If you want to know a little bit more, you can just go on Facebook and type in Her Sacred Fires. And this is the ritual that it's done all over the world, and sponsored also by and organized by Srita Dieste, facilitated by her, and it's absolutely amazing. Hecate, Liminal Rights by Avalonian Books, another book that really actually help you on understanding a little bit more about Hecate. And then you have also, and I think it's a wiser book, it doesn't really say here, but it is. This is one of the most, I think it's 88. It's the edition of 88, and I know that Wiser Book have a new edition of it. It's called Spiritual Cleansing, a Handbook of Psychic Protection by Dadra Mikaharik. And it's absolutely amazing. It's a very, very good book, talking about, the evil eye, how you can clean yourself, protect yourself, and it's a very, very good and practical book. Talking about Hecate, Her Sacred Fires, we have the edition of Hecate, Her Sacred Fires. Here it is. Very good book with a lot of texts by practitioners and worshippers of Hecate, the goddess of the crossroads. So here we are with all of the books, suggestions for you if you would like to take them. This was Rich Reads with Kerrigan. So write it down, all of the titles. If you have any doubts or anything, just write me an email and I will tell you what is that book that you talked about, so that you know the title and everything else. Don't forget that this show will be recorded for you, so you can always check back and listen to what was the title of that book. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest today, and then we're going to jump right into the conversation. And here we go. John Michael Greer is the Grand Archdruid of the Ancient Order of Druids in America, and the author of more than 20 books on the wide range of subjects, including The Long Descent, A User's Guide to the End of the Industrial Age, The Ecotechnic Future, Exploring a Post-Peak World, and the forthcoming The Wealth of Nature, Economics as if Survival Matter. He lives in Cumberland, MD, in an old brick mill town in the north-central Appalachians with his wife, Sarah. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest today on Witch Talk, John Michael Greer. Welcome, John. Welcome to Witch Talk. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. And thank you very much for having me on today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's always a pleasure to have, a druid for change, because, there's a lot of people that come to the show that they're witches or they're pagans, pagans in the sense of, not really a generalized pagan. But it's wonderful to have not only a druid, but, I always had a problem with this term. Because people say, some people have different pronunciations about this. How would you say your title is?
My title, Archdruid?
Yes. So you
Yes.
say Archdruid.
Well, at least that's the American pronunciation. I have no idea what it is elsewhere in the world, but everybody I've ever heard say it in America has said Archdruid, and so that's my full official title is Grand Archdruid of the Grand Grove of the Ancient Order of Druids in America. And now, of course, that and $3.50 will get you a cup of coffee, but.
But this is important. This is important because this is who you are, and this is what you are. Now, let me go back a little bit, okay? Let me go back to the beginnings of the beginnings, not the beginnings of the world, but obviously the beginnings of the life of John. And let's just revisit that. And how did you came to this path? I mean, how did you find the path of, I don't know if first paganism and then after that or something else. I mean, how did you begin interested in this?
How did I wander my way onto this? Well, start out. Let's reach way back into the distant past in the 1960s and 1970s, in a typical American suburb. In typical American suburban culture, which seemed at least at the time to be dedicated to the idea that the universe was very boring. The universe was a dull place. There were no mysteries. There were nothing that some scientist wasn't going to solve in about 6 weeks. And I had trouble with this from a very early age. I wanted the world to be interesting. I wanted the world to be colorful. I wanted there to be magic and mystery and wonder to it. And of course, the media and the schools and my parents and everybody else were going, no, sorry. You don't get that. So I was, from a very young age, I was fascinated in anything that would feed that taste for wonder. I got very deeply into fantasy fiction. Was the kind of kid who always had his nose in a fantasy novel. Tolkien's trilogy, of course, from a very early age, and then I finally ended up stumbling across the idea. Of course, magic is all through this fantasy fiction. So one day, in the book section of a department store in downtown Seattle, Washington, up in the Pacific Northwest, I came across this cheap little paperback that was about magic. Not magic as in fantasy fiction, but magic as in something you could learn and practice and do. And if somebody had handed me the Holy Grail right there, glowing with light, I would not have been more flabbergasted or more delighted. And I basically scraped together the $1.95, which was most of what I had at the time. That's the price of the book, and got out of there with this little book. It was Techniques of High Magic by Francis King and Stephen Skinner, one of the first basic introductions to Golden Dawn magic, to magic in the tradition of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And so, being the geeky kind of kid that I was, that's basically what I did. I studied that book. I found other books in the same tradition, got really, really deeply into it, and spent rather some years getting progressively further and further into the Golden Dawn system. To the point of course, eventually having the vast collection put together by Regardi, the great. Well, it was blue in those days; it's black nowadays. But going, and I literally did that one from cover to cover, doing all of the rituals, all the practices, making all the hardware, and so on. And it was about the time that I was most of the way through this. I was looking back over the whole thing and saying, this is incredibly cool. This has taught me so much, but there's something missing. And the thing that was missing then, was that the Golden Dawn system, it does not really have a connection to the Earth. And I'd learned a little bit about Wicca. I have to confess, I never really had much direct draw to that. It never really called me. And the sort of generic or general paganism, that also was, well, that's fine. That's not actually what I'm looking for. I want magic. I want it in buckets.
Yes.
But what happened at that point? I was involved in a Golden Dawn-based magical lodge in Seattle, and one of my fellow lodge members was also a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids of Blood.
Yes.
And so we were talking after a lodge meeting. He said, "Why don't you look into our Druid group? We do some interesting stuff. You might find it of interest." And so I did. I looked into it and then ended up getting involved and becoming a member and going through their whole study program.
The whole system, yeah.
And just when you've spent 20 years doing Golden Dawn stuff, the idea of regular practice comes very naturally.
Yes.
And so I finished that up, and I'm still, I still practice that stuff. I still practice some Golden Dawn stuff. But I was interested, I became very interested in Druidry, and I wanted to know what else was out there. What are the other traditions? And ran across a little book, small publisher, on American Druid groups that mentioned this group called the Ancient Order of Druids in America. Now, the author of this book did not think much of the Ancient Order of Druids in America. He was saying it's old-fashioned, it's stuffy, it's stodgy, it's kind of vaguely Masonic, and they're not anything like as nasty as Christians as we think they should be, or like nasty toward Christians, rather, as we think they should be, and so on and so forth. Now, I knew instantly that I'd love it. Yeah. But I tried to contact them. Got a letter back saying no such person, this address. Series of attempts to locate the thing followed. Eventually, I did get in touch with them. And it turned out that the Ancient Order of Druids in America at that time consisted of fewer than a dozen very, very elderly people. Because there was a whole world of American magical and esoteric and occult and alternative spiritual groups that flourished through the first two-thirds of the 20th century, but in the wake of the 60s over here in America, it's really quite remarkable. Most American people interested in magic got this conviction that all of magic was invented in England between about 1887 and whenever Gerald Gardner finished inventing Wicca. If it wasn't the Golden Dawn, or Aleister Crowley, or Dion Fortune, or Gerald Gardner, or the first generation of significant innovative Wiccans, they didn't want to hear about it. And so there were all of these very fascinating organizations that have simply died, and others that were just struggling along, and that's the situation with the Ancient Order of Druids in America. And, well, one thing kind of led to another. I joined, first person to join in a long time, and since I was about 30 years younger than anybody else in the membership, I ended up being moved through the chairs very quickly, taught various stuff, and then said, oh, by the way, you're going to be Grand Archdruid now. Because nobody, so I was going, nobody else was really in a position to do it. They were all very, they've had long careers in occult work and this sort of stuff. They're looking at retiring, and now they actually had a chance to do so.
Yes.
And so basically I had this thing plopped on me.
Yes.
And, here, kid, see what you can do with it. Well, we're doing pretty well now. We've gone from, that was in 2000, the winter solstice of 2003 was when I became Grand Archdruid, and of the AODA. And then, between then and now, about getting on 8.5 years now, we've gone from fewer than a dozen members to around 600.
Wow.
And it's
That's amazing.
It's constructive.
Very interesting.
We've gotten the word out, getting people in, and it's just we're not looking for numbers.
Yeah, no, but, of course, yeah.
But it seems that what we have does feel it has its own ecological niche, if you want to say.
Yes.
It attracts a certain kind of person who's interested in.
Yeah. Now, tell me one thing. I know a little bit about the structure of OBDO or BODE, and I know a little bit of ADF also. So, OBDO has, in England has a structure. Well, they have like these rights and everything, and then you have the ADF, which is very much, Indo-European, and and it's very interesting, a very interesting work. You do have a a body of liturgy, or you don't, or it's just you do, right?
Not really liturgy. The AODA tradition is primarily about personal practice.
Okay.
It is primarily about the process of self-initiation and transformation that awakens the potentials within each human being to enter into a fuller integration with the cosmos and to work creatively with the powers of the cosmos. That's what we're about. We're not about gathering in a congregation. Okay, well, that's fun.
Yeah.
But our work is the work of the individual.
Yes.
And so we don't have a lot of local groups. We also, you have to work your way through to a certain point in the training process before you can organize a local group. So it's been kind of a slow going.
Well, but it's very interesting. This perspective is very interesting, and I do find it in other orders also. Towards the transformation of the individual, but they go towards the gathering. So let's do it together and let's transform ourselves. You know what I mean?
And eventually there will when there's enough third degree people in AODA. Eventually, we'll probably have our share of local groves. I mean, we have the necessary stuff to do that. We have rituals for and so on to celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes. But that's kind of that's lagniappe. That's the frosting on the cake.
Yes, you're more interested in the bones inside of it,
Yeah, if you will. This is the matter. First bake the cake, then add the frosting.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So, we're working. The goal of our work is to give people the tools they can use to awaken, to empower themselves, to, as I was saying, enter into a more creative and more complete integration with the living world. And that's just, I mean, that's AODA's tradition. That's what we do. And there are many other ways to be a druid and many other ways to be a human being. And we're not saying that what we're doing is the right way. Any sentence that begins, the one true way is X, is probably going to end up causing like corpses or something like that. So we try to avoid that.
Of course. Now, tell me, let's talk a little bit about the definition of druid, and what is your vision about, how would you define it? I mean, obviously, we're talking about when people talk about druids, they're thinking about the ancient priests of the Celts and the Celtic, culture, but. What is it today? Did it? I mean, obviously, it had transformed all over the years into something else.
Well,
very probably close to what the very genesis of this was. But what is a druid today? So this is the question.
I'm going to take a step back because the first thing that I think that to my mind needs to be recognized by everybody is that none of us today are ancient Celts. There are no ancient Celts listening to this. Listening to this broadcast.
Yeah.
And there is nobody today who can possibly experience the world the way that a Celt in the 5th century BC could experience it.
Absolutely.
The differences are just vast. Furthermore, Druidry as we have it today does not descend from anything connecting to the ancient Celts. We need to accept that, okay?
Yes.
That's what we know about the ancient Druids. It's a lovely inspiration. It's something to look toward. We will never know what they practiced. We will never know what they did, and we certainly don't gain anything by pretending to be, doing a kind of dress-up game, a sort of society for religious anachronism thing where we dress up and make believe that we're ancient Celts. Druidry as a living tradition is a creation of the 18th century.
Yeah.
It emerged among a small number of British intellectuals, you could as well say a small number of British crackpots, who looked at the dogmatic religion of their time, and they looked at the dogmatic science of their time, and they looked at the mess that was already being made back then, in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, the mess that was being made of humanity's relation to the earth, and said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be another way to relate to the living earth in which we live and move and have our being. And the ancient Druids, what little was known about the ancient Druids at that time, was the inspiration. That was the thing, this whole dream of people worshiping beneath the open sky, teaching wisdom under the shadow of trees, some kind of spirituality that was part of nature, not as the religious mainstream of the time, rejecting nature, apart from nature, or as the scientific mainstream of the time, trying to dominate, control nature, but to actually participate in nature and draw wisdom from it. So that was their inspiration. That's where modern Druidry comes from. That's where the whole range. I mean, the reason anybody even thinks about Druids these days, there were a lot of ancient priesthoods, okay? I mean, you don't hear many people getting all bent out of shape about the Samothracian Cabirai or something like that. But people get bent out of shape about the Druids because these people in the 18th century and their successors in the 19th and early 20th centuries made Druids fashionable. They made Druids interesting. They reinterpreted the image for our modern world. And so I would say that what Druidry is now, it is an indigenous nature spirituality of modern Anglo-American society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's one of our indigenous spiritualities,
and
so which I know makes some people's heads tilt, but there it is. It's pushing 300 years old. Whether or not the old stories are right, and the first Druid group got going around 1717. There were certainly Druid groups in existence by 1740. They're documented. Mm-hmm. William Stuckley ran with one in suburban London about that time. Mm-hmm. And so, so we're getting on 300 years old, which is respectable for a spiritual tradition, especially an alternative one.
Absolutely.
We've got this rich body of tradition and literature and lore, some of which is completely giddy, and some of which is absolutely stark staring nuts. But that's part of the charm.
Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. Now, it's very interesting because it's very rare. I don't know. And we were talking offline about this a little bit when I said to you, it's very rare to have a Druid in the show. Because there's none. I mean, I don't know. It seems to be a very and it goes a little bit on what you said. It seems to be a very personal journey. It's very it's not. Mm-hmm. It's really something that I don't see. Anything posted or some announcements or you see all of other announcements going on, but Druidry and anything that has to do with it in America, at least I don't see it, and it seems to me very personal, not close, but personal and very private practice.
Well, it does vary. You mentioned ADF a while ago. I know they make an effort to be public. There's an ADF group about what would it be, about 160, 170 miles away from me down, which is of course in America just a little distance, but just downriver here in Baltimore, and I visited them and had a great time. And they make their events public. They're out there and insofar as any alternative spiritual group is in America today. But you're right that it tends to be much more quiet.
Yeah, it is quiet.
And it's one of those things. Even the groups that are very much into celebrating in a kind of congregation fashion, it's not. They don't go around. You won't see somebody knocking on people's doors saying, "I want to give you this literature about Druidry," or buttonholing people on the street saying, "Have you heard the word of the Druids? Repent."
Now, did you, after all of this art Druids and everything, after you received the responsibility and all of it, did you go to England and had contact with the OBDO, or does the order actually had contact with the OBDO, or do you have contact with each other?
Yeah, we're on a very friendly basis. Partly, it doesn't hurt that Philip Gargan and I are friends, and and I know quite a few people in the OBOD scene. I'm a member of OBOD. I'm an initiated of OBOD, a Druid companion, and I can that doesn't go away just because I have a different funny hat that I wear for other occasions.
Yes.
And so, for example, there's going to be an East Coast OBOD gathering here in Eastern Pennsylvania coming up this September. And it's going to be a great event, by the way. Any of our listeners who are within range might want to make a point of showing up, because Philip's going to be there, and I'm going to be there, and a variety of other people are going to be there. But, I'll be attending that. My intention is to attend that as just another OBOD Druid companion, and I'll have a good time. But I was actually over in Britain the last time in 2003, about 6 months before I got pole vaulted into the Northern Chair, as we call it in AODA, into the Grand Archdruid's role. And visited with Philip and Stephanie, and attended a bunch of OBOD events, and also did some traveling and some research. But so we try to maintain very good relations with OBOD. They are, if I believe at this point, the largest Druid order in the world, and their values and teachings and ideas are not that different from the ones that we've got. And certainly, if anybody comes to us and says, I'm looking for a correspondence course. I want a really detailed course, like with weekly lessons and so on. We just send it to them.
Yeah.
We just say, you want to hit the OBOD people. They will take care of you there. We do things a little differently, and it's all compatible.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let me go through a little bit more about the vision of Druidry, and your vision about all of this. There are some things that I think that are the pillars of each of the traditions. One of them is like what is really the vision of the universe? How did you see the universe? How did you see everything? I mean, how things have connections between them, if at all. And in Wicca you have we have the god and the goddess, and there's this whole mystery and whole mythology about it, and all these mysteries and all of that. They're acted out through the will of the year, and then do you do that? Do you use the will of the year? How do you do this? What is your vision about all of this?
Well, my personal vision is one thing, and the sort of vision that's embodied within the AODA teachings is not quite. It's compatible, but not quite the same. My personal vision is shaped by the fact that, along with these other things that I mentioned earlier, I've also for a very long time been interested in the science of ecology and the environmental sciences generally. Yes. And the nature of ecology is that it looks for connections, not in a dualistic sense, not in all things are one, but how is A connected to B? Mm-hmm. How does this plant relate to the other living things in its environment? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how can we quantify that? How can we make sense of that? How can we grapple with it in detail, not as a vague generality? Mm-hmm. And I find that very important, because it's very easy to get into the vague generalities and then to lose track of the fact that they have actual implications for our own lives. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But so one of the things that I brought to AODA as the seventh Grand Archdruid was this background that I've developed through the years in the environmental sciences. And so, as far as the mythological dimensions, the Wheel of the Year, things like that, well, the Wheel of I hope I won't offend too many of our listeners if I point out that the ancient year wheel yes. was probably invented in about 1953.
Yes.
And it was based on what I heard. Now, the Druid tradition, that is to say, scuttlebutt that I picked up in the English Druid scene, yes. is that what happened was that Gerald Gardner and Ross Nichols, who were good friends yes. and drinking buddies,
absolutely
came up
yes.
with it after about 4 rounds.
Yes.
Of some lovely brown ale at a local pub, and because the Druids, the older Druid tradition was to celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes, mm-hmm. and the original version of Wicca with one C. Had the cross-quarter days, but not the solstices and the equinoxes. And apparently the two of them had this great idea that, yes, we can combine it into an 8-fold cycle. How very cool. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, AODA established its traditions before that time. Yeah. Our order was founded in 1912. Mm-hmm. It's actually a spin-off of the charmingly named Ancient and Archaeological Order of Druids, which was founded by an English Freemason and his druidically inclined buddies in 1874. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't have the 8-fold year wheel. We celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes. Now, one of the things that we do is, we any of our groves or study groups are supposed to celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes and anything else that they like. So a lot of them do actually do the cross-quarter days also, because that's so popular these days in the pagan scene. But it's not actually central to our tradition. Neither is any particular set of mythologies central to our tradition, although a lot of people use them. A lot of people will draw on one mythic structure or another. We don't specify. What we are about is paying attention to nature. Mm-hmm. To nature as she exists through whatever form and whatever means and whatever set of metaphors you like, but it's still centered on nature. And so we have members who are, for all practical purposes, Wiccans, or not in the strict sense, but they worship the god, the goddess. Okay, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And they see the cycles of nature through that pattern. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have people who are pagans of various sorts. We have people who are pantheists or panentheists. Mm-hmm. We have Christian members. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have Christians who see the cycle of the life as the manifestation of the Word, of the second person of the Trinity through the cycle of the year, and things like that. We've got members who are secular atheist, humanist, scientific rationalists. How they make that work, I don't care. I don't know, but it works for them. It's fine with us.
Yeah, yeah.
But so basically, our core is we have practices. We have a way of meditation. We have various kinds of ritual work and so on, that the practice of these spiritual disciplines, if at all possible, daily. That's what we're about. What kind of belief system, what kind of opinions, what kind of symbolism you choose to use it's not at the core of AODA's vision. The core of our vision is personal practice leading to personal transformation, leading to a richer, more complete, more powerful relationship to the natural world on all its levels, from the most physical to the most spiritual.
Now, does AODA emphasize magic? Because I know you do. I know you love magic.
I personally emphasize magic.
Yes, I know.
AODA, it's an option.
Yes, okay.
It's something that people can do. We have a basic ritual called the sphere of protection. And that's part of the basic training. That's something that everybody does. If they're working their way in the study program, that's one of the daily practices. And it's the same. I mean, most magical traditions have one of those. If you're in the Golden Dawn, you do the lesser banishment ritual, the pentagram. If you're in different other, I know Wiccan groups where they cast a circle and call the quarters. That's their basic practice, and they do it regularly. With us, it's a sphere of protection. But that's the only thing that's hardwired into the AODA system. There is actually quite a wealth of magical lore that goes along with that. I published a modest part of that in my book, the Druid Magic Handbook, and that's entirely open. It's totally cool to do that in an AODA setting, and there's a fair number of people who are working that with one degree of intensity or another. But AODA as such, you can go all the way through the AODA training program and never do any magic that is involved in the daily practice of sphere of protection, and a certain amount of magical work that goes on in the initiation rituals.
Now, this is absolutely fascinating. I'm just, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with John Michael Greer, and it's just a delight to hear you talk. We're just keep talking, John. We'd just love to hear you talk about these things.
And let me go.
Exactly. No, I think that this is one of the qualities, really, really in the core of every Druid is the storyteller, and I think that you have it also. It's just this very. I don't know how to explain it, really, to tell you the truth, but it's what I feel. Now, you do have a blog.
I have a blog.
The Archdruid.
The Archdruid Report, yes.
Report, yes. .blogspot.com. So if you want to follow the Druid perspectives on nature, culture, and the future of industrial society, this is the place to go. Now, you do have a lot of books. Some books that you, and one of them especially I wanted to talk about, which is Mysteries Teachings from the Living Earth, which is absolutely when I actually I opened the book and I read the introduction and then I thought, oh dear, he's talking about the secret and all of these things.
Well, unfortunately,
it is true.
You
it
have
is
to
true,
talk,
John.
Somebody has to talk about the secret.
Absolutely.
Somebody has to talk, and somebody has to point out that with all the shtick and all the sales pitch and all the mysteries of the ages passed down to you, it doesn't work.
What mysteries of the ages?
It doesn't work.
Yes, I know.
As we found out not that many years ago, when all these people piled into the real estate market convinced that they could, create their own reality consisting of getting rich without having to work for it. You all know how that turned out. And it was precisely... Barbara Ehrenreich has done this fascinating book recently called Bright-Sighted, where she's arguing that the cult of positive thinking has been responsible for most of the major disasters in recent history.
Wow.
Because if everybody's only looking at the positive, then the fact that they're doing something that is going to kick them in the rump is not going to enter their minds.
Yes. But
I'm sure you can imagine how well this goes. Over.
Absolutely. Now, the introduction is absolutely amazing. I mean, I love this this when you say, you know, authentic secrets of ancient secret mystery schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it. I knew what it was right away.
Yeah.
Now, this is very interesting because you take this into a very interesting level because you talk about 7 laws.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking about, well, okay, the law of attraction. Everybody talks about this. This was an epidemics that actually began with The Secret and then went on and offshoots. I mean, it's like the, you know, of that particular, you know, movement.
And of course, The Secret, there was nothing original in The Secret.
No,
they didn't get it from ancient wisdom passed down.
No.
They got it from the 1950s New Thought literature, where it didn't do any better.
Absolutely.
It failed just as thoroughly then, but go on.
Absolutely. But here you are with this fantastic book, which you tie in not only the mysteries and it's very, very, it's a very beautiful book, first of all, and you know, and it's almost like if I had a definition for this book, I would say that would be philosophy poetry, I think. You know what I mean?
Because I do, and I appreciate that.
Yes, I think that's what it best describes. You know,
well, I wanted to try to boil down the things that had to be said about our relationship with nature, our relationship with spirit, the things that the New Age movement has gotten half right, and therefore, because they're only half right, they've been generating all of these disasters and failures. What if I could boil that down into the simplest terms and talk about it in a way that doesn't require any jargon, in a way that doesn't require any previous exposure to the sort of spiritual teachings that I come out of, the mystery schools. To use an old-fashioned but still valid term, whether that's the Golden Dawn or the various Druid systems or some of the other things that I've dabbled in from time to time, there's a coherent body of teaching in this that's been distorted and falsified to some extent in the sort of pop spirituality, exemplified by The Secret. And I was trying to how can I say this in a way that anybody can grasp? How can I say this in a way that and people who don't want to grasp it can still gently be shown this is how it works? And I realized while I was mulling over this that talking about nature, because let's start, you know, the basic assumption of Druidry and the basic assumption I think of most spiritual traditions is that the world of nature as we see it is a reflection of spiritual realities. Whether you're a Christian, you believe that nature was created by God according to divine will, whether you see it from a pagan point of view as nature is the expression of the gods or the god and goddess or what have you, or whatever version. If it doesn't work when applied to nature, it doesn't work. Absolutely. And so I thought, okay, let's walk through the basic. What can we say? When we look at the natural world, what do we see? What do we say? How does that apply to the world of spirit? And it was out of that mystery teachings from the living earth was born, basically.
It's absolutely amazing, and you know, and you go through all of these laws, and then you know, one of the things that it's very interesting, it's that this is a book that it's really kind of after you read one of the laws and the chapter and all of that, you kind of have to digest it slowly. So you kind of stop, you think about it. Maybe this is not the book to read. I mean, personally, for me, that was my experience. It's not a book that you can just read through and through, and just like no, you read one one of the laws, and then you just sit for a minute, and then you think about it, and then you kind of like look at things and kind of try to really, express it or kind of, see it, and then you go to another one, and then
you go to the next one. Yeah.
Yes,
that's one of the reasons that I included the meditations for each of the laws.
Absolutely,
people to encourage people to stop and sit down and just take it in and see. Okay. If first law, the law of wholeness. Okay, if the universe is a whole system, if everything in the universe relates to everything else, then what does that imply for my life? What does that imply for the choices that I'm making, and so on?
Yes.
If everything is actually interconnected, the way that ecologists recognize, what does that imply for the way I live my life?
Absolutely.
Because it has huge implications, and there are implications that a lot of people in the world right now are desperately trying to avoid.
Oh yeah. And sometimes I feel, John, really, to be honest with you, that there's a lot of people in the pagan scene that they think that they are, and they prophesize it. They're not prophesize, but they say this over and over again. Oh, I'm, the nature and Mother Nature and Mother Nature and Mother Nature, and then they just disconnect themselves completely out of what really is Mother Nature. You know what I mean? So why are you saying that you're kind of like, or why are you going into these gatherings and, with wings of fairy and, I'm not making fun of anyone, but I'm just saying, it's really... Yeah. It's not really, I mean, do you really understand what this is? Do you really understand what is beneath your feet? Do you really understand what is around you? And this book, it's what really kind of, it's a wake-up call. It's kind of, let's just talk about this, okay? Just sit down with the book and let's talk about this, This is what the book says,
Yeah, I mean,
let's talk about it.
The twinkle dust and the fairy wings, that's all very sweet. And okay, fine. If that's what you're doing for entertainment, that's cool. But it's entertainment.
Yes.
And if you're doing that and at the same time you have no idea where your drinking water comes from and where your sewage goes to. You have no idea how big is your footprint on the living earth. How much are you taking? What are you giving back?
Yeah.
And none of this has ever entered your mind, then nature is not what's going on here.
No.
And unfortunately, we have, there's been this tendency, especially starting in the second half of the 20th century, and with fantasy fiction and all of this stuff, building up an idea of nature that involves getting as far away from nature as possible. We can moon about sitting around in Lothlorien with the elves or what have you, and ignore the fact that our lifestyles are dependent on strip mining mountains and devastating the Amazon rainforest.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is, I don't know if you noticed this, but a couple of if you see, look at art. Look at the art expression. Look at the art, and you see, movies and things like that, and books and stories and things. You can see where our, the whole bulk of people are looking at. So now you have like movies like The Happening, for instance, which is nature is revolting against you. And it's it's not our fault. Now she's the bad guy, all right? And now she's killing everybody. Now, what are you doing? This is, you can see the shift in the minds of people, like, oh, no, we're not actually ruining everything. She's actually reacting towards us. We have to defend ourselves.
We have to defend ourselves by strip mining mountains.
Isn't that so predictable and so boring? I mean, it really is.
Well, yeah, it's
predictable.
It is. I see this. I see this whole thing. One of the other things that I write about, and it's the thing that's been central to my blog actually for quite some time now, is talking about that totally unfashionable topic, the limits to economic growth. And the fact that there's only so much petroleum in the planet, there's only so much of other raw materials, and our industrial society depends on ever-growing extraction. If you have a finite planet and you attempt infinite expansion of your resource use, there is going to be a collision. Not a fast collision, But we're actually in that collision now. And I'm convinced that one of the reasons that people are starting to get into this nature is out to get us is because nature is not coughing up the goods. We want our oil, we want our petroleum, we want our, and our fossil fuel powered lifestyles. And hey, Mother Nature, you're supposed to give us this stuff. And well, she has, and we've used up about half of it, and so it's becoming harder to get and more expensive. And we're acting like a bunch of 2-year-olds throwing a tantrum. Because the cookie jar is empty. And why is the cookie jar empty? It's because we stole all the cookies. Okay?
Exactly.
And instead of saying, okay, well, maybe we should have slacked off on the cookies and not giving ourselves a horrible case of indigestion. No. It's Mom's fault that the cookie jar didn't miraculously refill itself. Well,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mom at this point is irritated. Mom is distinctly irate, and we may find ourselves bent over her knee in a very undignified and painful situation. We'll see.
Well, now tell me a little. Now this takes us to another dimension on the conversation, and there's this whole thing. It's going to end. There's this whole. Now we have like the next step, right? It's the next step. Now, it's going to end. We're going all to die in the horrible fact.
Exactly.
What do you think about this?
Because that way we don't have to deal with the consequences of our own actions.
Absolutely, yeah.
The great thing about apocalypse is that apocalypse means never having to say you're sorry.
Exactly.
Literally, there's a lot of it that is it's the 2-year-old saying, if you won't give me that last cookie, I'm going to hold my breath till I turn blue.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it's really funny to watch because, as I said, I've been writing a lot about peak oil and things related to that, and half the people who come to the blog are saying, no, we're destined to have this infinite arc of progress up to some Star Trek future where we metastasize across the galaxy or something like this. And the other half are saying, no, you don't understand. We're all going to die like flies next Thursday. And I'm saying, no. Civilizations overshoot their resource base all the time. It's normally the way they die. Yeah. And they don't die overnight. I suspect to tell the Huns' mother told him, tell her Rome wasn't sacked in a day. Yeah. Civilizations take their time to decline. And so what I've been predicting, and it's a prediction you will not find in many other places, but I'm convinced that it's more accurate than either the infinite progress or the sudden apocalypse thing. It took us about 300 years for the Industrial Revolution to go from the first puttering steam engines up to, roughly where we are now. Mm-hmm. I'm arguing that we're going to see about a 300-year arc down. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see it and what's going on now is exactly what we're experiencing. Prices of energy are going up. Prices of technology is becoming a little more brittle. The environment is a little less stable. We had another spectacular round of tornadoes here in the United States. Can't have anything to do with global warming, even though what drives storm systems is the total amount of heat in the atmosphere. But you can't say that. So you have this situation where every year things become more costly, they become more brittle, the malfunctions increase, the costs go up, the burdens of repairing from ecological damage go up, and bit by bit we sink down the same curve we rose. Yeah. That's what I'm predicting.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's not something that most people are able to get their minds around, and it's not something most people are willing to get their minds around because it means that we don't get everything we want. And we don't get a nice, sudden, explosive end with the best possible fireworks and, a bunch of Hollywood stars playing the plucky survivors after 7 billion extras are chased off the scene.
Well, one of the things that really, I don't know. I just feel that people are not conscious enough, and what global warming? No, this is not. And then we don't have snow where it should be snowing.
Exactly.
And people say, oh, it didn't snow this winter. But it's fine.
Duh.
It's oh my God. I can't explain it. Mm-hmm. I don't. It's they're in denial, John.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, do you remember? This is dating myself a little bit, but Elizabeth Kubler-Ross years ago did a book called "On Death and Dying," where she pointed out that most people go through these 5 stages.
There's 5 stages, yeah.
Of grief.
Death. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the first of the, in dealing with their own death or dealing with the death of someone else, and the first stage is denial.
Yes.
It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And you get to see this in the peak oil scene all the time. The first thing people do is that can't possibly be true.
Oh, no. Yeah, no.
And that's what we're getting in the whole climate thing right now.
Yeah.
The level of denial, oh, man. But then you get then you start getting the anger. We've got a lot of that in America right now. The people who are raging against these bad guys or that. There's got to be a scapegoat. There's got to be a villain. Who's to blame?
Yeah.
That's anger. Yeah. Then we get into bargaining. We can biodiesel. That's it. We'll we'll switch everything to ethanol, or we'll do this. We'll do that. We'll build this new system. We'll take down. Bargaining. Then comes the depression. That's the hard one. And I've had to talk people through that, where they're, sitting there, they've realized that this dream of perpetual progress, this fantasy of onward and upward to the stars, this fantasy that they themselves can expect to make more and more and more money every year, is a delusion. It's a lie, and it's not happening. And you have to walk these people through it as their dreams and their visions, their hopes for the future have just fallen completely apart. Okay. And it's a very bitter thing. And then you reach the 5th stage of acceptance, which is also known as getting off your butt and doing something.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, here we are talking about this with your wonderful book, 7 Laws. So, explain to us a little bit about this book. So you wrote this book because you thought that it was urgent, first of all, to put, we have a say, I'm Portuguese originally, from Portugal, Lisbon, and we have an expression in Portuguese that it's put the little dot in the I. So you have to put the little dot in the I, meaning that you're setting the record straight. And let's just talk about, you want ancient wisdom? Let me tell you about ancient wisdom. Let's talk
about ancient wisdom.
This is what you're writing here. So basically, this is what the book is. It's absolutely
ancient
amazing.
Wisdom is not a ticket to getting a new SUV.
No.
Okay? Ancient wisdom is not about figuring out some way where the universe is going to pay you a big salary you don't have to work for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the universe doesn't exist for your benefit. It's not some kind of vast spiritual internet store that never sends you the bill. This stuff gets absolutely to an absurd degree. Once, this would be about 4 years ago, walked into a New Age bookstore in the town where I used to live at that time. And there was this book very heavily featured, Principles of Cosmic Ordering. And I looked at that and went, wow, cool, that could be great. So they're talking about the fundamental order of the cosmos, the deep structures. No. It was about placing orders with the cosmos as you would do with a department store. Okay, and this is how to order things from the cosmos for delivery. And if you don't get them, here's the complaint office.
Oh, wow!
It was one of the most absurd objects I have ever seen.
That's amazing. That really,
and yet, this kind of thing is extremely popular.
It is
because people in the middle class, especially but not only the American middle class. We're talking about the most pampered group of people in the history of the earth. Literally, these are people. I mean, your average middle class American has access to pleasures and conveniences and comforts and opportunities that emperors could not get 500 years ago.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, do you remember I think it's one of the Grimm's Grimm's fairy tales, where some poor little orphan is driven out in the snow on Christmas Eve and told by the wicked stepmother, to go get strawberries in December. Right nowadays, you just go down to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And so people who have been raised thinking that this level of absurd wealth is normal. Natural, and that they deserve it.
Well, this is what I mean. People say, the world is a reflection of what we think about it, about what the world is and what we need the world to be, and and it is true. It is true. That drives all of the greed and all of those things that we talked about previously, about, oils and things, and get the sources, out of control. And it's just horrendous. Now, tell me one thing about the 7 laws. You have the law of wholeness, flow, balance, limits.
Flow, balance.
Limits, cause and effect, the law of the planes, and the
law of evolution. Yeah.
Yes. So can you just talk a little bit about each one of them very briefly and tell us?
Sure. I can sum them up quite promptly. In fact, the law of wholeness is simply the short form of it is simply that the universe is a whole system. Everything in it, including you, including me, are all part of a single process. There are no rigid boundaries. Nothing is outside. Nothing is separate. Everything affects everything else. Everything influences everything else. Everything is affected by and influenced by everything else. Therefore, for example, you play a part. You participate in creating your own reality, but you don't do it single-handed. Your reality also creates you. Your reality was there before you were born. It'll be there after you're dead. So that's the law of wholeness. The law of flow is everything flows. It's what Heraclitus said so many years ago. Pantache, everything flows. And if you're thinking of getting stuff, accumulating stuff, piling stuff up, you're clueless, because that's not the way the universe works. The more of a store you build up, the more pressure you've got for the flow to continue in a different direction. And in fact, everything that makes life work is a flow, not an accumulation. So, the law of balance is exactly what it sounds like. If things balance out, you can't actually get all happiness all the time. And the more you try to get all happiness all the time, the more you're going to land yourself in misery, because the balance is going to take place. There are ways to work the balance. There are ways to manage it so that, for example, you accept certain kinds of discomfort to bring yourself certain kinds of comfort. You may, for example, put up with the muscle aches of doing a weight workout because you want to be healthy and in shape. Or you might say, discipline yourself by not eating those foods that make you ill, or what have you. There's all kinds of, but you can't just do everything you want all the time and be happy all the time, because the balance is going to cut in. And that's as true with money as it is with everything else. So, now the fourth law. In any set of 7 laws in the mystery teachings, the fourth is the hinge. It's the pivot on which they all turn. The first 3 lead into it. The last 3 come out of it. And in this case, it's also the law that nobody wants to hear about, and that's the law of limits.
Yes. Yeah.
I once had an experience. I was invited to this mostly New Age get together on nature spirituality, and they had all these various people there, and they said, "Oh, we have a Druid come," and everybody had like 15 minutes in this big general thing to talk about what their tradition taught them about about nature spirituality. So I spent my 15 minutes talking about the fact that limits are real, and they're good, and they're necessary, and they're the source of beauty and power. And I got about a dozen words out of my mouth before the temperature in that room must have dropped by 30 degrees, and nobody wanted to hear it. In fact, it's been very common in pop spirituality these days to treat the idea that there are limits is the next thing to original sin. It's this evil thing. If you believe in limits, you're like making yourself limited. Blah blah blah. No, in fact, every one of those people who was sitting there listening to me and turning and frowning more and more and more nastily as I went on was depending on limits at for everything. The chairs they were sitting on were limiting them from falling onto the ground. Okay, their bones were limiting the capacity of their flesh to. I mean, we won't even have to talk about the bowel and bladder limits. There's all of these limits that keep us alive. We have an immune system to limit the capacity of other organisms to devour our flesh, and so on. Yeah. People are talking about, I want to be completely free of limits. A human being completely free of limits is a puddle of red slush. Dead. Absolutely. A dead puddle of red slush.
Yes.
Limitation is the source of power. That's you learn that very quickly if you ever choose anything. If you direct all your power in one direction, you're limiting all the others, and that's when you have effective power. If you want something, want one thing at a time, and you will achieve it. You accept limits. But limits are also the source of beauty. If you look at beauty in nature, you look at a blade of grass bending in the wind. Okay, everything that makes that beautiful is a function of the limitations that grass is under. The extremely elegant way that it's coped with a limited amount of physical matter, a limited amount of energy and a capacity to resist wind. And the wind is limited too. And it's those limits, the interplay of those limits, that make that jaw-droppingly beautiful. Mm-hmm. And when we avoid limits, we avoid beauty, we avoid power, we avoid manifestation. We avoid the capacity to do much of anything. So, the law of limits is kind of a longer version of the short form there.
Absolutely wonderful. Okay. Law of cause and effect.
Law of cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has a cause. The cause of the effect must be of the same kind and on the same scale. What this means, for example, is that if you want to change something let's say your mental experience of the world, you have to change it on the mental plane, and it takes causes of them on the mental plane to do that. If you are responsible for your problems, changing your outside surroundings is not going to affect them. You know, somebody who is the classic example is somebody who has an inadequate feeling of self-esteem and tries to make up for it by becoming rich. Okay, you'll end up with a rich person with a horribly deficient sense of self-esteem, because the problem has to be solved on in
a different level. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Actually, this is spilling over into the law of the planes as well. You know, they kind of overlap here. But you've got to, a heated argument will not start a forest fire. Things and everything needs to function of its own kind, on the right scale. So you can't, for example, by simply changing the way you think, get money flooding in toward you. Among other things, law of balance here. If you want to receive something, you need to give something. You need things to be in balance. Okay, law of the planes, we've actually kind of, as I said, tiptoed into that. There are different kinds of existence. There is a kind of existence we can call physical, dense matter. Mm-hmm. There are kinds of existence that move, well, symbolically speaking, up from that. We, being primates, we have this sort of internal memory of climbing trees to get away from the ground. So we think of matter as low and other things as ranked above it, up the branches of the tree. Mm-hmm. Probably if ants ever work out philosophy, matter will be the highest plane, and you'll go down from there into spirit. But there are different kinds of reality, and they don't interact in a just blurry into one another. Mm-hmm. You can move matter with your mind. You do it every time when you pick up something with your hand. Your mind motivates a muscle, through the nervous system, and the hand goes up and lifts whatever it is. But try to lift something without moving your hand, and you'll find out what the limits are. And so you need to pay attention to the planes on which action is taking place. You need to pay attention to what you want, what plane is it on, and keep things straight that way. Finally, evolution. And this is the one where people end up rolling on the floor going gaga, because we've got this bizarre notion in modern times that evolution equals progress, and it doesn't. We think, well, we're more evolved than Neanderthal or something.
No,
thank you. No. We're not. Actually, we are no more evolved than blue-green algae. We've all been subject to the same amount of evolutionary time. It's just that they got it right first.
Look at the theory of evolution. And he talks about it. It's not about being better or more or whatever. It's adaptation. You do adapt.
It's adaptation to circumstances.
Yes.
It's evolution.
So it's not better. It's not.
Evolution is the individual's adaptation to the whole system.
Yes.
And so, you get these. One of the things I talked about in the book, you've got, if you see a fox trotting across a field. Okay, the fox is a very elegant, very effective predator. If you were here 50 million years ago, you might see a tritemnodon, which was a primitive mammal, not unlike a fox, about the same size, and it ate roughly what foxes do. It was, as far as we can tell, just as efficient and just as elegant as a fox is. A fox is not an improvement on a pteranodon. And 50 million years before that, it was a Sauronothoides, which was a small fox-sized dinosaur that ate lizards, basically. They didn't have. There weren't a lot of rodents in those days, and so it had and it was also, fox-sized, very elegant. I don't know if you want to pet one particular, it's kind of scaly, but it takes all kinds. But there's always going to be, in any reasonably well-developed ecosystem, something filling the niche, the ecological niche that's filled by the fox. Whether it's a Tritemnodon, a Sauronothoides, 50 million years from now, it'll be something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're not better than one another.
No, and this is the notion of evolution when it's we're evolved from being blah 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 and we can do blah blah blah. It's really not what it is. I mean, evolution.
Exactly.
If you look at the theory of evolution of what it is actually adaptation more than anything else.
It's adaptation. I would love to be, if I were briefly emperor of the world, what I would do is pass a law that anybody who uses the word evolution in that kind of sloppy progress towards the better and best sense has to sit down right there. Somebody grabs up, sits down right there, hands them a copy of Darwin's Origin of Species.
Yes.
You cannot leave this spot until you
read it.
Read it. It's actually a fun book. Darwin,
but you know what?
Right.
I think that if you are, or if you study biology, if you are in a biology major, if you do kind of dabble into biology, you do understand that. If you study Darwin, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I would like to see, and this is kind of a dream of mine, this is something I would love to see in the Druid community and the pagan community more generally, is people, instead of spending so much time talking about nature, let them get out there and study it.
Yeah.
I think we need to see pagan ecologists, pagan biologists, pagan botanists and zoologists, people
that. In the other, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
It's very interesting because I'm still a college student because I'm this is my second degree, but so I was going through the Department of Geology, all right, and I was walking in the corridor and suddenly I begin to listen to this conversation that was going on in a classroom about Odin and the gods and and this and that and this and I was like, wow, these are students of geology, so these are actually juniors of geology, and I was like impressed. I was like, wow. There is something going on. I mean, there's some, and people really do. Especially people related to biology, they begin to kind of look at it in a different way, which is wonderful. So
I think it's absolutely great. That's really good news.
Yeah.
I want to see that. I want to see it to the point where, if you start a training program in a Wiccan coven, let's say, part of that training program is learning the local environment, learning okay. What are the plants who grow here? What are the animals? How do they relate to one another? What kind of geological mazes? What's underneath our feet? What's above us? How does our climate work? What we talk about the circle of life. Okay, great. It's all around us. Let's learn about it and learn how to apply that practically. I mean, the one of the most basic essential altars for pagan worship these days ought to be a compost heap. That's where you make your offerings to the Earth Mother. She has a lot of use for organic matter right now. If you want to, compost it and dig it into your garden, that's a very good thing. Yeah. And there's all kinds of practical stuff that can be done with that kind of knowledge. That frankly we need a lot more people who know how to do. No, and we also need to, that theoretical knowledge, the understanding of the cycles of nature, so we can listen to the politicians go and go, that is complete nonsense. Mr. Politician, what you are saying proves that your head is so far up where the sun doesn't shine that you're probably digesting your own hair.
But it's
which
it's
of course
just,
is usually the point, and I think most people have that sense anyway. But still, it's nice to know the details.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now we're talking with John Michael Greer, ladies and gentlemen. This is an amazing book, Mystery Teachings from the Living Earth: An Introduction to Spiritual Ecology, and we're talking about the 7 laws. John is proposing 7 laws, and a little bit derived by, these other things. I mean, it's good. Good thing that The Secret came up. Because otherwise, probably you wouldn't read you wouldn't have write this book.
Well, it would have been different.
Maybe it would be different. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, there's an older book that I actually modeled this on a little bit, and it was published almost exactly it'll be a century ago next year. What was it this year? I'll have to look that up. The Kybalion.
Oh, yes, yes.
Which also has its 7 laws, and I probably should have them by heart, but I don't. But it was an attempt based on the by an occultist of that time, the quote 3 initiates who wrote it. Were actually one guy named William Walker Atkinson, who was an occultist in Chicago at the time.
Yeah,
and actually a very influential guy.
Yeah.
But Atkinson wrote this thing, and he was trying to boil down the basic ideas of the mystery teachings, spiritual wisdom as he understood them, into 7 simple concepts that almost anybody could grasp. And so it was in fact, it's been something that I've talked about for some years now, for about a decade. The idea that we need something like this for ecology, and so that was it was to some extent the secret that inspired me to give it this particular form.
Absolutely.
But the idea was there. Because there's an enormous amount of wisdom to be learned from studying the ways of nature, and we very badly need to apply that to our lives, to our societies, to our own behavior, here and now. Just as in the day of the Kybalion, Atkinson thought it was very important to take the essentially psychological twist that he put on things. He said, look, you need to pay attention to what's going on in your head, how you're thinking, what you're thinking, and why the processes of your mind are messing you up. Here's how to get out from that.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely amazing, and I thank you very much to write this because it was needed. We needed this.
Well, thank you.
And in various areas, you're going to be amazed on who is taking this in and who is studying this, actually. So it's very interesting. It's very
I would like to be amazed.
It's very interesting. Now, I'm just predicting. We're talked about a little bit about the laws and how, but I want to talk about also. Well, first of all, this is a Wiser book. I got a couple of books here that are from Wiser also that I talked about today. But let's talk about the format of this. So you do have the law, and then you explain the law, and then you go on a meditation that he created and an affirmation.
There's a meditation, there's an affirmation, and a theme for reflection.
Yes. And then, so it's, how would you think that it's the best way to work this? And how do you think that it's the best way to take advantage of this?
Well, it's very much a matter from one person to another. So for some people will want to read it through cover to cover once and then start going back over it a bit at a time. Some people will want to do as you did, and read a section on the laws and then just stop, set it aside for a while, think about it, turn it over in your head, this kind of stuff. It's there. One way that it was designed to be used in AODA and in some of the other traditions that are related to it. There's some connections that I haven't really had a chance to talk about yet, but. The style of meditation that we use involves taking a seed thought, taking a concept or a word or a phrase or a symbol, and you enter into a meditative state and you think about it. You're actually using thought on a subject as the focus of your meditation, maintaining that same clear focus that you would on any other topic of meditation, but moving through a set of thoughts toward a goal. This book is designed to be used that way. So that you can take most, the ideas that are given in it, the concept, the phrase, even individual words here and there, whatever catches your fancy. You can pick that up and say, okay, what does this mean? And then the standard way that we do it is when you're doing reading like this, you'll read a book and you'll have a notebook or just a piece of paper or something, and make little notes about concepts that intrigue you, things that you want to know more about. You build a list, and then that becomes your fodder for your morning meditation. Mm-hmm. You'll take one concept, let's say the concept of wholeness. Okay, what does that mean? So you'll enter into meditation. You do, relax your body, do some rhythmic breathing, start the meditation, and just wholeness. What does this mean to me? What does it mean to be whole? And work through it that way. Think through a chain of chain of thoughts as it comes to you. And don't let your mind wander to other topics. Just bring it right back on there until you come to some kind of insight about wholeness. And then if you feel there's more to it, do the same thing the next morning, or move to the next one on the list. Mm-hmm. That's one of our really core spiritual practices in the AODA tradition. Mm-hmm. And this book can be used that way. Or, people can just read it, and I'm sure a fair number of people will just read it and walk on. And then others will find their own ways into it. I know, different people have their own styles.
Now, the thing that I have to address also, it's the mm-hmm. afterwards, mm-hmm. and you do have a list of books,
I'd suggest a few books in the two traditions that I know a certain amount about, and say, these are, if you're interested in the mystery teachings, here are some starting places. It's not the only good books out there.
Well, no, but it's good. It's a good list. I mean, it's really a good list.
They're the books that I've really found very influential. The writings of Dion Fortune,
yes.
The writings of Gareth Knight. I mentioned
mm-hmm.
the Kabbalion in there.
Yes,
There's some theosophy. There's some. There's the book of Druidry by Ross Nichols, which mm-hmm. is dense but well worth study. And there's a lot of other
dense. It is. I bought it in Lisbon once, and I said, mm-hmm. This is, it's not a small book, actually. And and I said, oh, wow, all right. But it's Ross Nichols. I mean, Ross Nichols, mm-hmm. and I thought, I'm going to... I read the first page, and I didn't understand a word that he was saying, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have 5,000 more to read, and I don't understand
That book is actually very good fodder for the kind of meditation that I've just described.
Yeah.
Because it packs in so much. So you simply, you read a sentence of it.
Yeah.
And you take that sentence, you meditate on it for that, the next morning. There you go. Okay, what does it mean to say? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And at the end of your 30 minutes of meditation, you will have figured it out, and you can go on to the next sentence.
And then, 5 years after, I finished the book.
And you're going to read some other things in the meantime, I'm sure. But it may take you 5 years to work through the book, but you know what? By the time you get out, you're going to have a comprehensive grasp of Nichols' vision of Druidry.
Absolutely.
And you will have learned a huge amount, and you will have had enough material to keep you busy meditating for 5 years, which has all of its own advantages.
It's absolutely wonderful. So, a wonderful, wonderful book. Now, let's talk about, so this is Mystery Teachings of the Living Earth, An Introduction to Spiritual Ecology, John Michael
mm-hmm.
Greer, and in my opinion, philosophy poetry that, everyone should read. Now, let's talk a little bit...
I think everyone should go buy a copy.
Oh, absolutely. No, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, it's this fantastic other book that you have, the Druid Magic Handbook,
mm-hmm.
Ritual Magic Rooted in the Living Earth, and
mm-hmm.
you have a foreword by David Spangler. And
David Spangler, yes.
It's very interesting, but I can understand, because you said I want buckets of magic.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is what I want. Now, what was the drive on writing this?
Okay, well, the Druid Magic Handbook is basically a sequel. The original book is the Druidry Handbook, mm-hmm. which is the book that I crafted as it's basically the first degree training program of AODA.
Yes.
That's what it's about. It walks people through the history, the philosophy, the symbolism, the basic practices, and so on. So mm-hmm. you've got that book. You've got our first degree training program. One of the things that makes us different from a lot of other groups is that we make that public.
Mm-hmm.
We don't keep it all hush-hush and everything, and you have to join and cough up a bunch of money to get it. But because it was the first degree training program, again, it didn't really put a lot of emphasis on magic, because
mm-hmm.
AODA, the core program isn't about magic. It's about meditation and spirituality, celebrating the cycles of the seasons and living in harmony with the earth. But I am a magic geek, okay? That's what I like to do. I'm very much into ritual magic. And so there was all this other material that had been gathered up over the years in the AODA tradition. And a couple of my predecessors as Grand Archdruid were let's see, there was Dr. Juliet Ashley, who was a hypnotherapist and Jungian psychologist back quite a few ways now. She was the third Grand Archdruid, and she put a lot of magical stuff in there. And then Matthew Shaw, her successor, who had connections into the Rosicrucian scene and all kinds of other places. So they brought in all of this rich magical material, and I was just going, wow, this stuff has got to get into print. Because I'd done a whole bunch of work with it myself, and I was having a grand time. I'm a magic geek. Yeah. And so, and because it's rather different from most of whether the more or less Wiccan derived or the more or less Golden Dawn derived or what have you, it's rather different from the other magical stuff that's readily available these days. And I was going, the world could use this. So I wrote the thing in, I don't think it took me 5 months to write it. So I'd been, of course, practicing this stuff for years. By the time I wrote it, so it was I didn't have to look up many notes. The first chapter that kind of puts things in historical and philosophical context, that took a little research, but everything else was just been here, done this, done the work. Now let me write about it.
Yes.
And so it was. Some books are fun to write. Some books are fast and lively, and this was one of those.
Yes.
Some books are a slog. Fortunately, this was not one of those.
Oh,
And so but basically this. It's not official AODA required teachings, but it's if you like the AODA approach to things, if you like the way we work, our spirituality works, you like our ceremonies, here's some magic. Here's quite a bit of magic. Here's a complete system of magical training with which you can have a lot of fun and do some impressive things.
Now, is this, although it's called Druid magic, can this be practiced by? And you just say this in the
it's very flexible. It's very flexible.
Yeah.
You would have a hard time practicing it from within one of those traditions that treats nature and matter as bad.
Oh yes,
the sort of dualist sort of thing, and you'd have a hard time with this magic in that context. It just would not work well because so much of it works on the relationship between what we call the solar current and the telluric current, the energies from above and the energies from below. And if you're into the idea that the energies above are all good, and the energies from the bad are evil incarnate, or the energies from below are evil incarnate, then you're going to have problems with the system. If you realize that the two of them are balanced energies and they can be brought, they can't be unbalanced and destructive, but they can be balanced, they can be brought into harmony, they can be fused to create something more. Then it's going to be a worthwhile thing. And I think certainly most pagan traditions, the saner Christian traditions. I have to use so rough a word there, but there are some branches of Christianity that, frankly, to my mind, have basically gone off their rockers.
Yeah.
And the people who are yammering around expecting to be raptured off the planet. I mean, come on, the rapture is a lightly disguised suicide fantasy.
Oh my God!
No, it is. When
it's like let somebody else do the job for me because I can't really do it. So let's just stay here and be wrapped by something.
Exactly. I can't be bothered to attain anything spiritual. I'm going to wait for Saint Scotty to beam me up aboard the Enterprise. But it's a suicide fantasy. When somebody tells their children that grandma has gone to be with Jesus, most people know what that means. And I am really worried that as things get worse, and I think they will, as the economy continues to unravel, and as social stresses build, and the frustration of people who think they deserve something they've done nothing to get spins out of control. I'm afraid we're going to see, this sort of Heaven's Gate kind of thing on a large scale with a lot of Christians here in the United States. It could get really ugly.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now the other book that I want to talk about, it's Learning Ritual Magic. Let's go a little bit, into the ritual magic, and its fundamental theories and practice of the solitary apprentice.
Well, that comes out of my Golden Dawn background.
Yes,
that's the other end of my magical practice, and that is not just my book. That was done with two.
Yes, I know.
Two
it's
other
Earl
people.
King. Yes, Earl King Jr. and Claire.
And Claire Vaughan.
Yeah.
So it's basically one of the things we found. This was I mentioned that I was involved in a Golden Dawn style magical lodge in Seattle, and one of the things we found in that lodge is that people would come to us with some background in Golden Dawn magic, but there was this whole additional bunch of basic training they simply didn't have. They didn't know how to meditate. They didn't understand the basic elements of Kabbalah. There were a whole series of basic things and basic exercises that we had picked up from various sources that most American people in the Golden Dawn, even experienced people, don't know. And so this was originally our training course. This was the thing we'd give people. They'd work through it for 9 months, complete the course, and then they'd join the lodge. And after the lodge ended up changing focus and doing some different things for a while. And in that process, the course that we'd written had been basically surplused, and so we discussed it with, and got appropriate permissions and published it as a book.
It's absolutely. And I'm kind of, I don't have the book, but I will have the book because this book looks absolutely fantastic. And it really looks very. I mean, by the description, I'm on Weiser's web. Yes, are you there? Yes. Hello.
Hello.
We lost him. I don't
Hello.
know. Hello. Hello. Whoops. Hold on. Let me just call him back again. All right. So let's call. Hi. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Not a problem. We got cut off somewhere in there. But
somewhere. I don't know.
No. You never know how these things go. But at any rate, it's a good introductory book. And if anyone's interested, anyone who's interested in kind of a good basic foundation in Golden Dawn magic, I certainly recommend it.
It's really, it looks very, very good. I didn't read it, but you
should run out and get a copy, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really, really interesting, and I'm in Weiser website, read Real Weiser, and the description is just delicious. I mean, it really is very, very interesting. And
I will certainly tell that to the marketing people. I want them to have
that they. I think that they secretly see the program, the show. Secretly. They're never known, but they are there. And there have been, absolutely fantastic with us and providing, all of the books and things. I mean, it's wonderful. Weiser is absolutely wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, John Michael Greer, we talked about mystery teachings from the Living Earth, and also about his two other books, one of them, Learning Ritual Magic, Fundamental Theories and Practice of the Solitary Apprentice, and also the other book, Druid Magic Handbook. So it's absolutely fantastic. First of all, to talk to you about all of these not law of attraction themes.
Thank you.
And to find out that you do have a fantastic book called Mystery Teachings from the Living Earth, and I'm sure, again, I'm going to say this, you're going to be amazed about what people will pick this up, because I'm sure that witches will pick this up, and any other tradition will pick this up, because this is the fundamental. So. This is the fundamentals of you have fundamentals in everything, and this is the fundamentals. So I think that it's absolutely.
If we're going to follow a religion based on nature, we need to know something about nature. And so, one of these things I would like to do, and I actually talk to Weiser about this someday, is a book on ecology for pagans.
Why
or
not?
For basically ecology for people who are interested in the spiritual. How does the world actually work? How does nature work? Because we actually know a huge amount about that these days.
Yeah,
and
we do.
It could be told very, very simply. It's not, you don't have to know all the complicated math to be able to understand the process. If you want to go out and do, you want to get deeply into science, you need to learn some math. But there's much to be gained from a good general knowledge to look at, to look at things and say, any material substance moves in a circle.
Absolutely.
For example, energy always flows from sources to sinks, but matter always moves in a circle, which means it always gets behind you and kicks you in the butt if you're not paying attention.
Yes, absolutely. Now, one of the things that I want you to tell us is that, I want you to tell us, do you do any kind of talks or anything that people can go to hear you or to kind of, engage with you in any kind of...
Fairly often, yeah. It depends very much on where our listeners are. And these days I'm located in Western Maryland. My wife and I moved here about 3.5 years ago, and bought a house and all, up in the mountains. And so I get to places around the East Coast and in the Midwest fairly often. But my basic rule is that I go when people cover my bills, because I can't afford. I can't afford to travel on my own. But I do talks in various places. I will be at the East Coast gathering of OBOD in Eastern Pennsylvania, as I mentioned. That'll be in September. Around Memorial Day weekend this year, I'm going to be. There's an event actually also in Pennsylvania, but in South Central Pennsylvania, which is called the Age of Limits. And a bunch of us in the peak oil scene are getting together at this very interesting pagan retreat center. And we're going to be talking about, humanity is running nose first into the brick wall of planetary limits, and that's going to have some fairly serious impacts in several senses on all of our lives. How can we deal with this gracefully? How can we respond to this in a constructive fashion and in a way that's going to be for everyone's benefit? And how are we going to keep ourselves alive during what will at times be a very rough road? And so that's Memorial Day weekend. If you just look up The Age of Limits, I think in fact it's theageoflimits.org, but I could be wrong on that. But if you Google the phrase
to The Age of Limits?
No, just The Age of Limits.
Oh, it's just The Age of Limits.
The Age of Limits, and that's the name of the event. But I love other events, people, and I can always be gotten a hold of. If somebody is desperate to hear me talk and wants to find a venue and start charging tickets, let me know. I can as long
absolutely.
As long as
what is the best way to contact you?
Usually to go straight through my publishers.
Okay, that's good. That's
so
great.
Yeah, if somebody wants to contact Wiser, for example. What are they? Redwheelwiser.com these days. You go to redwheelwiser.com, go to the contact page and the publicity people or marketing. Contact them, let them know, and they are very good at getting to me if they have some kind of an event like that.
Age of Limits, everythingtogether.org. So that's what it is.
Is it Age of Limits? Yeah, okay.
Age of Limits, yes. Without www, don't put the www in there. It's just ageoflimits.org.
Okay.
And it's wonderful. It's conversations on the collapse of the global industrial model. Friday, May the 25th. Through Monday, May 28th, 2012, Memorial Day weekend at 4 Quarters. So that's where it is.
It will be a good time. The other main speakers are serious folks. We've got some great speakers on the whole peak oil thing. People who are very well informed. One of them, Dmitry Orlov, is everyone in the peak oil scene knows Dmitry. He is among the funniest people you will ever meet, with that sort of deadpan Russian sense of humor.
Yes.
He's saying things in a totally straight face, and everybody is rolling on the floor. The guy's brilliant, but he's also he really has a clear idea. And there's a number of other really good people who are coming, and so any of your listeners who are within range, mark them on the calendar. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, thank you so much, John, for being on Witch Talk and to kind of sharing this absolutely amazing wisdom with us and to actually write it down, which is even better for us all.
the one thing that I'm more of a geek about than magic is books.
Yes, me too.
I learned to read at 2.5. I have been a book, just I've been crazy
I
about
got
books
to a
all my
point,
life.
John. I got to a point, John, that maybe if a book comes in the door, I have to move. So it's kind of that serious,
Yeah,
So.
oh yeah. When we moved here to Western Maryland from Oregon, the single largest quantity of stuff that we had was the 62 banker boxes of books. After sold a whole bunch. So yeah.
No, yeah. So you know what I mean.
No,
Well,
I
thank
do.
you very, very much for being here. Don't go anywhere. I'm just going to finish the show, and then I will be with you in a minute. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you for being on Witch Talk. Thank you
Thank you for having
much.
me.
Thank you. And this is the final part of Witch Talk. Now, next week, I told you, we have absolutely amazing guest. Just go on Facebook and you will see. It's absolutely amazing. So I'll see you next week. Until then, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. Bye.